So I was going to do a top 10 album list, but straight up, there are way too many for me to make a top 10 list. So we're not going to do that. Here's what we're going to do instead. This is 10 Lake Crook Mouth essential albums. So if you're one of the 12 and a half Lake Crook Mouth fans out there, this is 10 records in no particular order that I love, that have informed my music a lot, and that I think you should listen to. Let's get into it. First, we have got Fresh Cream by Cream. So every year, 2 years, I'll basically rediscover Cream and listen to them non-stop. So this is Cream's debut album. Now, Cream was a supergroup of the best musicians in London in the mid-60s. We got Ginger Baker on drums, Jack Bruce on bass, Eric Clapton on the guitar. In 2 years and 3 albums, Cream fused jazz, blues, and pop together to create the foundations of what will become rock music. Now, while their other 2 records are probably more popular than this one, for me, the fusion of their backgrounds is the most obvious and the most interesting in this record. Now, it needs to be said, there are 2 things that almost ruined this record. Number 1, I Feel Free is not on this vinyl. I Feel Free was a single. I think it's one of the most underrated songs ever. You can listen on the streaming version of the album, but the vinyl does not have I Feel Free, which I only learned after buying it, and I'm still mad. And number 2, this record has very extreme mid-60s style stereo panning, and that can be quite challenging to listen to. But in my opinion, it's still better than the mono version. Because being a 3-piece band, there's this huge amount of space between all the instruments, which they've filled with this very luscious EMT plate reverb. It makes the whole record sound like it's come from some ethereal plane. Like it's coming from the future that'll inspire so many bands to create. Well done. All right, next album. Pretty Odd by Panic at the Disco. So this record dropped when I was 13, and at the time I was a really, really big fan. I loved this record. But emo pretty quickly became very uncool. And while emo's had a bit of a resurgence recently, it's kind of hard to explain just how cringe emo was in, say, 2016. So I stopped listening to it for a decade or so. But a few years ago, when emo came back into favor, I gave it a listen again, and it's such an amazing record. I think A Fever You Can't Sweat Out's kind of become more popular, but I'll die on the hill that Pretty Odd is the far, far superior record. This is one of the most epic, ambitious, awe-inspiring, and technically mesmerizing albums I've ever heard. The way they're able to layer all these instruments and backing vocals together in a way that sounds cohesive, that doesn't sound jumbled or muddy or intense. As a music producer myself, I'm utterly blown away. To me, the production and layering of this record is on the level of the Beatles, and just some of the best songwriting, quite an underrated record and something that needs a lot more love. Next we have Let It Be by the Beatles. Now, Let It Be has got a bit of a bad reputation when it comes to Beatles fans. As far as I can understand, the only reason people don't like it is because Paul said he didn't like it, because this record is fantastic. I think it's the Beatles at some of their most raw, some of their most chaotic, some of their most rock and roll, but also some of their best songwriting. Across the Universe, Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road, Get Back. This record gets a lot of unearned hate in my opinion, and I think it's about time us Beatles fans accept that this is a fantastic Beatles album. It's one of their best. Next, from right here in Sydney, we have Sticky Fingers, Land of Pleasure. So these guys are one of the biggest Australian bands of the 2010s. They're currently very popular overseas, but they are also currently cancelled in Australia. And I'm not going to go into why. But despite this, if you go see a Gen Z band in Sydney this weekend, chances are they'll cover a Sticky Fingers song, because very simply, they wrote the best songs. Dan Hume's production on their first 2 records, this being their second, is some of my favorite I've ever heard. I constantly use it as reference tracks for my music. It's lush, it's immersive, it's psychedelic, it's kind of beachy. It literally sounds like Sydney. And while we're trying very hard here in Australia to keep them cancelled, I think one day we'll be ready to let bygones be bygones and admit to ourselves and celebrate that Sticky Fingers are one of the greatest Australian bands of all time. They're one of the best bands of the 2010s. I'd even be inclined to say that maybe they're the best band of the 2010s. All right, next we have Operation Doomsday by MF Doom. So I discovered this record after the very devastating breakup of my first band. But in the chaos of it all, I found a lot of comfort and hope in exploring hip-hop. I became very interested in drum machines and beats, and while devastating, my band breaking up gave me the time to explore these sounds. And this exploration actually ended up being the foundation of Lake Crook Mouth. So in my exploration of hip-hop producers, of course, MF Doom comes up. And this record just blew me away. In a genre full of bravado and egos, there's MF Doom. I love how unpolished and scratchy this record is. I love its sense of humor. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and as a result, it taps into some energies that are very rarely found in hip-hop. It's playful, it's adventurous, it's silly, but it's also got a lot of really goddamn good beats. All right, next we have Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of favorites, but Led Zeppelin is my favorite band of all time, and Houses of the Holy is my favorite record of all time. Now, when I was getting into Zeppelin, I only listened to their first 4 records, because for some reason I'd heard that the rest of them weren't very good. But one day I decided, oh, well, let's just give it a go anyway. It took a few listens to me to get my head around it. It's quite different from the first 4, but slowly I just became obsessed with it, and I kind of realized, yep, this is my favorite album of all time. I don't know why, it just is. The record isn't perfect, but it's just such an adventure. It's such a journey. You got the high highs of The Song Remains the Same, and you got the low lows of No Quarter. It's everything I want a record to be, and it's my favorite record of all time. Next we have Rust Never Sleeps by Neil Young. So I started getting really into music when I was 16, and I was lucky enough to share my interest with my best mate, Cal. Now one day I was in the car with him and his dad says, I hear you getting into music, mate. I got something to show you. And he absolutely blasts Powderfinger on this record. But even better, a few days later, I came home and noticed there was a little package on the doorstep which had my name on it. So I picked it up and opened it, and he had bought me the CD of this record and left a very beautiful note, encouraging me on my little musical journey. And it was one of those foundational times where you realize just how much music can connect people. It's one of my favorite stories. It's made this record so very special to me. So yeah, shout out to Michael Coleman for giving me that CD. Love you, mate. Next we have Born This Way by Lady Gaga. So I was an early teen when Lady Gaga blew up, and I have this wonderful memory of my sister showing me Speechless off the Fame Monster, and it just blew me away. But unfortunately, by the time Born This Way dropped, I was at the bottom of the food chain at an all-boys high school, and being caught listening to this record would have been a death sentence. So I'm pretty sad to say that I missed the cultural moment that this record had. But luckily enough, I made it into manhood, and a few years ago I decided I'm going to listen to this album for the first time. And dear God, this album is one of the most crazy, intense listens you'll ever find. This album is one of the most talented pop stars of all time just showing off in the best possible way. This album is gay clubbing. You're going to party harder than you ever thought possible. At times, you will be scared for your life. But no matter what happens, you will be taken care of. You will receive help if you need it, and you will get home safe. Next we have the double EP, A Sea of Split Peas, Courtney Barnett. So as an artsy Australian male who's never been very interested in sport but has worked as a labourer, Courtney Barnett is my spirit animal. She is clever and romantic and profound, but she's also silly and quirky and has an excellent sense of humour. She finds the humour and romance in the everyday experience, be it gardening in Avant Gardener, a night on the town in History Eraser, or an intimate dinner in Anonymous Club. Courtney Barnett is down to earth. She'll write her poetry with dirt still under her fingernails from a day's work. She's the Australiana that's rarely talked about but very often seen. Alright, last but not least, London Calling by The Clash. Now, London Calling is a very revered album, but I'm here to tell you that it's not revered enough. You don't listen to London Calling enough. I don't listen to London Calling enough. London Calling is the blueprint for modern music. Everything that's happened in music since this record came out was on this record in some way, shape, or form. It's probably the best double album of all time, and probably the only album that should be a double album. It's got some of the best beats, it's got some of the best bass lines, it's got some of the best lyrics and best melodies, and it's not overproduced or overdone. So I say we all need to talk more about London Calling. You need to join this cult, because this album could go toe-to-toe with any album, and frankly, any piece of art ever made, and it would have bloody good odds. Alright. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what are some of your essential albums. I love listening to new music, so yeah, chuck them in the comments. If you can listen to my album in the description, you should give them a go. They're good. I'd like more streams, thank you. And yeah, you can sign up to my Patreon for weekly album recommendations. Thank you very much. 10 Lake Crook Mouth essential albums. Get it in ya.